Let me talk a little bit about what the first folio is. Folio refers to the size of the page of the book. So that if you had a piece of paper and you printed it like this, and you folded it only once, that would be a folio. And the Shakespeare first folio is about 13 inches by 8 inches coming straight off the press. And then you would take all the pages and gather them like you have done with this booklet, stack them up, put them together, and then you would stack up a bunch of these booklets, sew them together, and that would be your book. What is the first folio? It is what we've affectionately come to call this publication from 1623 that collected 36 of Shakespeare's plays into one volume. And the project came about 7 years after Shakespeare died. Two of his friends, fellow actors and fellow shareholders of the Globe Theatre, wanted to do this as a tribute to their friend, as a memorial to him. And they were in a unique position as members of the theater company to have copies of manuscripts or prompt copies of the plays to work with, to collect them and then publish them. So at the time that Shakespeare died, only half of his plays had been published. And the other half arguably would have disappeared on the ash heap of history. So why do I make that claim? We know of about twice as many plays from that era, Elizabethan and Jacobean era, as we have copies of. And Shakespeare would have been spot on. 50% of those plays would have survived. So publication of this book meant that half of the plays were saved from extinction. Some plays you might have heard of: Antony and Cleopatra, Macbeth, Cymbeline, a long list of half of the plays that would have, 18 would have been lost to the ash heap of history. The other plays had already been published, but they were not secure in history either. So as an example, the other plays had been published in quarto form, so if you took this page and then you folded it one more time, then it would be a quarto size. Okay? So many copies, 18 of the plays had already been published in these sort of single booklets that would contain a single play. But they were by no means secure from disappearing. The play Titus Andronicus, which is the first play that had been published, written by Shakespeare and published at the time that he was alive, survives in only one copy. And that was discovered in a Swedish library at Lund University, and is now in the possession of the Folger Shakespeare Library. But had that copy not been discovered, or had it been tossed somewhere, Titus would not have survived either, except for the first folio. There are other plays. Hamlet had been published twice as a quarto. Once pretty close to the version that you know from the first folio, the other one not quite so good. Probably published when a printer would have sent a stenographer out into the audience and said, well, when they start performing it, write as fast as you can. And what they came up with, sometimes not exactly what we remember from the copies that we would have studied in high school. And if you want a comparison of a very famous soliloquy from Hamlet, I've got that in the Millionaire and the Bard side by side with the first quarto publication of it, and then the version that we know today, and they're quite different. So, that's the short version of what the first folio is. It's this gigantic volume of Shakespeare's collected plays, all of them except Pericles. That's the one that's missing. Among other things, besides saving half the plays from extinction, it became a fetish object for collectors, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well.